Welcome to Unschool, where we undoctrinate you from public school nonsense. Men are no longer going to college, right? It's dropping under 40%. Under 40%, according to some statistics. Less than that, of men going to college. It's 6 in 10 college students are female now. And why would men want to go to college? If you're going to get labeled the enemy, right? Why would you want to work there if you're going to get labeled the problem that is causing everyone else's issues for some reason? So unfortunately, college campuses are now 12-1 left to right, according to Jonathan Haidt, and some people still don't want to realize that in K through 12, there's some right wing people left, but in college there really isn't. 12-1 left to right, with humanities and social sciences being the furthest left, and those being the ones that have the most women in them as well, getting gender studies degrees, a lot of different degrees that end in the word studies. And something I've realized just in the last few years as a college professor is that the word is that when is that if a major ends in studies, a lot of the time it just means Marxism. That's basically what it means. I didn't realize that for a long time, but apparently that appears to be the case. At least heavily influenced by Marxist ideology, and that's the case with critical theory. That's the case with the Paulo Freire's and Michel Foucault's of the world. Some of those topmost cited sources in the humanities and social sciences. So it says here a recent viral news story reported that a generation of young men is abandoning college. The pattern has deep roots. American colleges and universities now enroll roughly 6 women for every 4 men. This is the largest female male gender gap in the history of higher education, and it's getting wider. Last year, U.S. colleges enrolled 1.5 million students fewer students than 5 years ago. The Wall Street Journal recently reported men accounted for more than 70% of the decline. My mentality is there's a lot of degrees that really aren't worth it. I still say that business and IT are useful. There's probably a few other majors that can at least get you a job. If you're in school for that long in the university system, you should definitely be going for something that's going to get you a job, because you can do plenty of studying on your own time. You can be an autodidact or self-taught person on your own. And, and vocational work, obviously. I'm always a big fan of that. There's lots of vocational work out there. And there's some articles coming out saying Gen Z is going to be that generation that focuses on vocational work. So that's cool. The statistics are stunning. But education experts and historians aren't remotely surprised. Women in the United States have earned more bachelor's degrees than men every year since the mid 80s. Well, and that was the goal. So they kind of accomplished their goal to get more women in education back in the 80s. But we kept going in the same direction where it's harder for men to get money to pay for college. I mean, one of the biggest factors is definitely the expense. Every year, in other words, that I've been alive, this particular gender gap hasn't been breaking news for about 40 years. But the imbalance reveals a genuine shift in how men participate in education, the economy, and society. The world has changed dramatically, but the ideology of masculinity isn't changing fast enough to keep up. What does that mean? I think we need to go back to a bit more masculinity. For decades, American women have been told that the path to independence and empowerment flows through school, although they are still playing catch up in the labor force. Yeah, because statistically speaking, over 80% of working age men want to work, and only 50% of women do. And that's been the case. It doesn't matter how many people, what the statistical difference has been in how many people went to college. That's just the case. It's over 90% of men between 25 and 55 work still, and most of them want to work, but about 50% of women do, and they have a variety of reasons for that difference. But quite a lot of women want to work less hours as well. They don't want to do the 70-hour work weeks, and I don't blame them, because neither do I. Women have been barnstormed into colleges. That is the very definition of progress, I suppose. I don't see how it's progressive when all the men are leaving. In poorer countries where women are broadly subjugated or otherwise lack access to regular schooling, girls enjoy no educational advantage whatsoever. Yeah, so in some countries, that is unfortunate. In America, if people want to go to college, they can go to college, but it can be expensive. And in other countries, even in European countries, they'll say, well, they have free college. Well, there's no such thing as a free lunch. And if you look up the statistics, they have lower percentages of people going to college in many of these European countries where they say it's free, right? Because it's not really free. They end up having stricter standards to keep people out of college because they don't actually have the money to pay for everyone to go. Still, gender equality on some things important education presents problems. No matter what direction the inequality points, while men are more likely to go to college than they were 10 years ago, something seems to be restraining the growth of male enrollment. In 1970, men accounted for 57% of college and university students. 2 years later, Congress passed Title IX that prohibited sex-based discrimination in any school that received federal funding. The fact that the gender gap is even larger today in the opposite direction than it was when Congress determined that we needed a new law to promote equal education seems like something we should pay attention to, said Richard Reeves, a Brookings Institute senior fellow who is writing a book about men and boys and the economy. I'm struck by the fact that nobody seems to understand why this is happening. The U.S. education gender gap isn't just a college phenomenon. Long before female students outnumber men on university campuses, they outperform boys in high school. Girls in elementary school spend more time studying than boys, are less likely to misbehave than boys, and get better grades than boys across all major subjects. For decades, guys have been less likely to graduate from high school, less likely to enroll in college immediately, and less likely to finish college and earn a diploma, Reeves told me. There is a linear educational trajectory for girls and women. Boys and men tend to zigzag their way through adolescence. Well, but they don't have any influences, right? It's never been lower, the percentage of boys with a fatherly influence in the home. And when they go to school, there aren't a lot of males around either. About 80% of teachers are female, and this is not a criticism of those female teachers. The majority of them are hard workers. It's just that it would be useful to have more male influences so they could learn how to grow up properly. Sociologists and cultural critics have taken many dubious stabs at why the gender gap in education is growing. Some have blamed the feminist dogma of the education system and inherently distracting presence of girls in classrooms. I don't put much stock in those explanations, the writer says. The story I prefer begins with the economy. For much of the 20th century, men without any college education could expect to earn a middle class salary in fields such as manufacturing and mining. Yeah, I think this is nonsense as well. I don't think that's the reason. By far, the majority of men never actually worked in manufacturing. Even in the 50s, it wasn't the majority. It was and America is still number two in the world in manufacturing. Maybe number one. China might not be being honest about their numbers. So we're still one of the top in the world when it comes to manufacturing. So this author doesn't really know what they're talking about. The education system and the way it functions has changed dramatically since the 50s, 60s, 70s. Nowadays, I think female teachers have designed an education system designed by females for females. It's all auditory learning, sitting in class, holding still, not staying active. Males have higher levels of testosterone, even the boys do, and they have a harder time sitting in class doing nothing for long periods of time. And so it's not really fair to them to teach them that way. I think there should be more education, more vocational stuff, more building things in public schools, and that's just not happening. So they're blaming everything on changing of times, and I really don't. I don't agree that it's the economy is the problem. Men are going out and still getting work. Majority of them are still working. It's the education system that's failing them. So this article also talks about why so many men are abandoning college degrees. A large number of men are foregoing college, leading to an alarming gap between university-educated men and women. The Pew Research Center discovered a large drop in male Hispanic high school graduates turning away from four-year colleges. While 42% were in attendance in 2011, the number fell to 33% in 2022. So yeah, 33%. While males had a substantial drop as well, while 49% attended college, the number have moved to 40%. Why are so many men fleeing higher education in droves? In part, the migration of young men away from college can be explained by a growing and widespread skepticism over higher education and the high student debt it often leads to. In 2022, the total number of 18 to 24-year-olds enrolled in college had declined by 1.2 million since its peak in 2011. That coincides with a growing 1.75 trillion of student debt nationwide. And some businesses are getting rid of college degree requirements, as they should. I mean, some people have joked that college degrees are the new high school degrees, as standards are lowered further and further. Public schools are not teaching anyone properly, right? In school after in state after state, people are not meeting reading standards. They're not meeting math standards, and so on. And some of this falls on parents as well. Parents are not pushing their children to behave properly. They're coming into the schools and they're not respecting authority. You don't need to be a slave to authority, but you should have some standards that you follow. So this is amazing. A November survey of 800 U.S. companies by Intelligent.com found that 45% of companies will get rid of bachelor's degree requirements for some positions next year. And another recent survey of 70,000 small businesses found that 67% of the surveyed employers believe college graduates aren't prepared for the workforce. Yeah, that's true. If you're majoring in business or IT, you should be working on that on your own time as well. Make a small business, even if it's a lemonade stand. Write some software, even if it's just how to play checkers. Simple stuff to start out, and why not try to sell it? By losing focus on the mission of preparing their students for the career, they become a non-factor or even a negative factor, especially when they're pushing politics. These kids are coming into school and they're telling them all this critical race theory nonsense from the outset. I'm hearing about it more and more in the introductory courses right at the beginning of school. But that doesn't tell the full story. The reduced number of college students is largely by men, with 1 million fewer young men in college today and just 0.2 million fewer young women compared to 2011. So women are starting to drop off as well, a little bit behind the men, but they're declining. And colleges are losing in state after state. Some of them have lost, a million or more just in an individual state over the past decade. Overall, only 39% of men who completed high school are enrolled in college, down from 47% in 2011. A lot of men don't see the point of a degree when it's so expensive, and they feel a lot of nihilism about their job prospects post-college. Yeah, I mean, they're disappointed, and they don't have a positive outlook going forward. So it's not a good idea to get $100,000 in debt that you will be paying off until you're 40. The labor shortages of the past few years have hit the trades harder than other industries. Krapa Chetz told the Newsweek high school grads, particularly men who are attracted to the trades, are finding that they earn good salaries without racking up tens of thousands in college debt. I also don't really agree with this part from The Atlantic. It says, "My biggest immediate worry is that men are making the wrong decision," Golden says. "I worry they'll come to severely regret their choice if they realize the best jobs require a degree they never got." Well, as we just discussed, more and more businesses are removing degree requirements, and quite a lot of people for decades and decades ended up getting jobs in fields that had no relation to their college degree at all. Yet, boomers in particular kept pushing the narrative that you had to get that college degree no matter what. But it just didn't make that much of a difference. College grads typically marry college grads, but this trend of associative mating will hit some turbulence, at least among heterosexual people. If present trends continue, the dating pool of college grads could include 2 women for every guy. I mean, that sounds all right. For those of us who do have college degrees. As women spend more time in school and their male peers dwindle as a share of the college population, further delays in the marriage and childbirth may ensue. That would further reduce U.S. fertility rates, which worries some commentators, albeit not all. I think women should probably stop thinking of college degrees as being a prerequisite. I mean, it's not really that. I have 4 of the college degrees, but I don't think that it means what it used to mean. The most severe implications, I suspect, will be cultural and political. The U.S. electorate is already polarized by college and gender. Women and college graduates strongly favor Democrats, while men and people with college degrees lean Republican. Those divisions seem likely to worsen if the parties' attitudes towards each other calcify into gender stereotypes. My biggest worry is that by the time policymakers realize that gender inequality in college is a problem, we'll have hit a point where college will seem deeply effeminate to some men in a way that will be hard to undo. I think that's already the case. I think they see all of education that way, not just college. From elementary school, guys are checking out, right? I mean, what's the first thing you do in first grade? You have to make macaroni art or something. I don't think that the boys are that interested in that kind of stuff. Now you go in there and you build robots, or you use I forgot the name of those electronic things where you can train them to make robots or code or do what have you. Those things are pretty cool. You could have kids messing around with that stuff, that though, and actually building stuff as opposed to just making art. Not that there's anything wrong with art. I'm glad there are good artists in the world. Some of them do my tattoos, but nevertheless, I think boys would like to do more physical things than what's being pushed in school. And it says that's why we need both parties to offer a positive vision of college and a positive vision of masculinity. If male identity is seen by some as being at odds with education, that's a problem for the whole country. So they're really alluding to a much more serious problem in education where a lot of the teachers kind of look down on the males, kind of see them as a nuisance, kind of think they should just be on medication so they can be as you know as big a followers as the students that they like better. But unfortunately, that's not really helping. So a lot of them are just checking out of school completely, as I said before. The solution to the college gender gap should be as broad as the causes. Specific policies to reduce childhood poverty could increase high school graduation rates. Recruitment drives to advertise teaching jobs to men might help too. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think more men are going to go into education. It just keeps going up with more and more women entering the education system. Northern European countries have even higher rates of female teachers, and it seems to me that that's the way it's going to be, unless the way school changes dramatically. Because as we go more and more towards lecture, that's a bit more appealing to females on average, not exclusively, but auditory learners do better in the school the way it's set up now, and so on and so forth. Monetary and fiscal policies that maximize employment and minimize poverty are likely to help men who might otherwise respond to unemployment by withdrawing from their families and communities. This in turn could help boys and young men stay in school. Yeah, I don't think that's going to make a difference. I think that the type of education that they're getting is more important. The Wall Street Journal reports that some colleges are putting their finger on the scale for male applicants to avoid having their schools become 70% female. Yeah, we don't need another identity politics movement. We don't need a men's identity politics movement to go along with the litany of other ones that already exist. We need to return to individual liberty, judging people by the content of their character, and then in what we learn, probably learning a wider variety of things. All of that was taken out of education, including stuff that women might have been interested in as well. If we wait until college to intervene, it's too late, says Thomas Mortison, a senior scholar at the Pell Institute for the Study of Opportunity in Higher Education. The pivot point is in adolescence, and the foundation is laid in the early grades. The gender gap is an economic story, a cultural story, a criminal justice story, and a family structure story that begins to unfold in elementary school. The attention-grabbing statistics that barely 40% of college grads are men seems to cry out for an immediate policy response. But rather than dial up male attendance one college admissions department at a time, policymakers should think about the social forces that make the statistic inevitable. Yeah, so we can't just talk about institutional change. We have to talk about cultural change as well. I think that's what they're getting at there. And nobody really wants to go to college. And as these people say on Reddit, it's too expensive. That's a major factor. The proliferation of student loan tuition has risen to the point that college is often no more than a money suck, the kind of money suck that can put you in debt for life. The return on investment, it just isn't there anymore. After decades in the U.S. workforce and an MBA, I sincerely believe the nation would benefit from deprioritizing college as some kind of essential badge of achievement. I think that's true. I mean, I could get a doctorate degree, but it seems like the only point would be to say that I have one. And, so more and more men are leaving. It says here, less attention to the trades. And number two, anti male attitudes in higher education. That is definitely the case, unfortunately, because it's not really liberals or conservatives that run the education system, it's the extreme left. I think liberals disagree with a lot of the nonsense espoused in the trainings in not just education but institutions in general in this country. But student loans are a serious problem. Decade-long campaign specifically telling young men to get a job in the trade instead of going to college. Well, that sounds like a good thing. I don't feel like there's anything on the side of telling young women to go to nursing school or get IT certs instead of going to college. Plenty of women are going into nursing. Some men do it as well. I went to college, and I'm pretty glad I did. It opened up enough doors to offset what I spent on it. I can see the appeal in trade school, but I kind of wonder how people's back and knees are going to be after working as a plumber for a few decades. I mean, in some areas of the country, you get paid way more than you will for most jobs that require a college degree. This guy got a degree in psych, a waste of time. Unless I went for my PhD, even then, yeah, you could be a teacher or you could get certified. But yeah, a lot of people have different things to complain about. A generation of American men give up on college. I just feel lost. The number of men enrolled at 2 and 4 year colleges has fallen behind women by record levels in a widening education gap across the U.S. So, yeah, millions of disaffected men is usually a recipe for disaster. And they've been telling men for a while that they were the problem. They're the reason why everyone else is having more difficult times. And they've been blaming things on men, and blaming that on young people that haven't done anything yet is pretty despicable. So, but the education system keeps pushing those narratives anyways. Nothing quite like getting your 4 year degree and thousands of dollars in debt just to be rolled into manual labor. Yeah, well, sometimes manual labor can pay well. I have a college freshman son. Honestly, most of his friends' parents are doing literally nothing to guide them or giving them horrible advice. Go to private school and get a business degree. Don't worry about the 100K in loans. Get a business degree from a place where it's really inexpensive, you know, and just get it done immediately. Don't dwell on it. Just go do it. Take a large load of classes and get it done. And then this also on Quora has a few discussion points about why there's this decline of men in college. It says here the prevailing philosophies in modern upper education tend to be hostile to traditional virtues of manhood. Female leadership is encouraged, supported, and celebrated, while male leadership is regarded with neutral or, more likely, negative attitudes. Traditional manhood is considered toxic, while traditional gender roles in general are considered oppressive or at least retrogressive. Well, not just traditional gender roles, but your existence as a male is considered a nuisance in much of the education system. Demographically, men tend to think and vote more conservatively than women, so it is not surprising that overall liberal institutions, as much as of the higher education system has become, tend to attract more women than men. Men tend to view college as a means to a career, while women may be more likely to view college as an enriching experience. I don't think you should be spending tens of thousands of dollars for an enriching experience unless you are already rich and have the money to do it. Otherwise, you shouldn't be going into tons of debt for something that's not going to get you work. Although men are a minority in college overall, they are a strong majority in engineering and technology disciplines. So those majors should probably, or those career paths probably shouldn't require a college degree. Technology, I with coding, you can get tons of certificates, don't necessarily need a college degree. This makes sense if college is seen simply as a pathway to a career. Also, engineering schools, in my limited experience, seem to be less political on the whole than other disciplines, so that may play a role as well. So, yeah, a lot of interesting points here, but it seems to me that it will continue to be the case that less and less people going to college. Over the next 10 years, I think that far more women will choose not to go to college and instead to educate themselves in some other way that's far less expensive.